Even leftists are starting to see that we are walking down a path to dangerous global tyranny and authoritarianism. And media hacks are, what did Stalin call them? Useful idiots everywhere, ushering in a role of the authoritarianism they claim to be fighting by fighting Trump. The irony of it is so thick, it's unbelievable. How blocking Trump puts the future of the internet at risk. Again, I'm guessing the politics of the person. Granted, it is a guess, but it's kind of an educated one from reading the piece. This person appears to lean left. And it shows you that, hey, Joe, some on the left are getting very concerned about the growing threat from big tech. Some are starting to wake up. We've had people like Matt Taibbi and Glenn Greenwald who've been woken up by the Spygate thing. But some on the left are starting to say, is this really the road we want to go down? This is part 2 of the segment I discussed before about we really want to do facial ID for banking, facial ID for law enforcement, facial ID databases. Oh my gosh, financial institutions, that could get ugly, right? Can't even get a bank. A bank found me at a Trump rally through facial ID. You want to live in a surveillance state? Before I get into the piece and 3 screenshots from it with her key, I want to get into a topic. Joe, this may ring a bell to you. You want to talk about our early days? This is when we were recording, I think, from my kitchen or something, back in Severna Park, Maryland. Do you remember when we talked about the difference between the public and the private self? We did a whole show on it. How it was a long time ago. It was like a Sunday. Remember when we only did Sunday? Yeah, you're right. Like show 2 or 3 or something on SoundCloud if it's still up.
Yeah. Barely remember, I do.
Yeah, Joe and I were discussing for probably an hour that although there are obviously many distinctions between totalitarian, authoritarian states and freedom-loving states, constitutional republics, I've always believed, I've said on the air, and I said in that early show, that the primary difference you always need to be concerned about between Soviet-style systems of government and freedom-loving republics like ours, or ours used to be, is the distinction between the private and the public self. What do I mean? This is an important point before I get into this. In a North Korean Chinese-style model, there is no meaningful distinction between the public and private self in contrast to a republic. What I mean by that is you're relatively confident in a God-given rights-based society like we have in the United States, thank the Lord, that when your garage door closes behind your car, or you lock your door after entering your walk-up apartment in Manhattan, that what happens inside that apartment, if it doesn't break any known laws, is your business. Some of it's unsavory. People go in, they do stuff. People are human beings. It's not illegal, but I'm saying, people are in the house. People use the bathroom with the door open. That's something you want public, right? I mean, folks, I'm trying to make a serious point. You don't feel like you're under surveillance, or you didn't. People go on the internet, people watch porn and other stuff. They don't want that out there. A lot of people do it. It wouldn't be the most popular sites in the world otherwise. It's just a fact. Everybody knows other people do it, but they're all embarrassed if it gets out by them. People do things in their house. They walk around with naked, like Chris Cuomo at CNN was caught on tape naked in his backyard. Maybe he did want that out. I don't know. Most people wouldn't, right? But in a freedom-loving republic, you have that private self where you're like, yeah, when I close my garage door and lock my door, I'm not out in the public. I can pick my nose in peace. I can do what I want. When I'm out in the public, if I do it in my car on the way to work, people are looking at, yeah, that guy's picking his nose. You don't do that. Why? Because you understand there's a public self where you're restrained in your behavior. I'm not talking legally restrained. I mean, just things people consider unsavory, but not illegal, even though they do it themselves. You don't sit in your car and pull up a toilet bowl and walk in the back seat and do your business if your Tesla car's on autopilot. Why? Everybody goes to the bathroom. Why don't you do it in public? Because it's embarrassing. It's private. You understand in totalitarian regimes, there is no private self. All of your communications are monitored. The Soviet Union, did you know? Read a history book, leftist, made national heroes out of kids who ratted on their parents. Did you know that? I'm not kidding. Just look up the stories. Who ratted on their parents for being dissidents. The Soviet Union made heroes out of them. Parents had to be wary of what they said in their own house. There was no private self. Everything was public and subject to sanction by the state. Now that I set this up, I want to get into the piece where the author, again, who's clearly leaning left, is like, hey, once we start shutting down Parler and Telegram and WhatsApp and Signal and all this other stuff, we're going to start pushing people into more private means of communication. And it's only a matter of time before those private self communications, email and others, are monitored too. Oh, kind of sounds like something we've warned about on this show for like 72,000 years. Screenshot number 1 from this piece. Read it. Read it. Here's one of their big concerns. Quote, Sam Lesson. Despite the fact that email is in theory a distributed protocol, in practice, several large companies, such as Google via Gmail, have huge control over which emails get delivered and which are suppressed. What? This is a huge liability because it means that through internal employee pressure or external political pressure, Google may be forced to step back from the central promise of email, which is that you get the messages you want delivered to you. That is the promise of email, right? If under pressure, Google starts breaking that central promise, will people move to alternative providers? Maybe. Again, there are some enlightened leftists out here who are starting to see that we're going down a dangerous path. You see the slippery slope we're on? Oh, we'll just ban Parler. That's where all the hateful conservatives are. Okay, then they move to Telegram. Yeah, we'll just ban Telegram too. Then they move to email lists like I have. Don't worry, we'll just pressure Google to not deliver Dan Bongino's emails. No, Dan, Paul is like, it's already happening. AR15.com, a website I love, was wiped off the internet by their domain hoster. You comfortable with this, leftists? You happy? Of course you are. You're totalitarians. Of course you love it. Again, not all leftists are. They're starting to realize that we're getting into a really dangerous place. Google, yeah, we're not going to send out Dan Bongino's emails. Wait. That's the central promise of email. You're going to deliver the email. No, not for you. Not for you. We're going to accuse you of inciting violence. Yeah, okay, I'll sue you too. Because you're a liar. This article is incredible. So step number 1, they moved to email. Here's step number 2, piece from the piece. It says, this is long, but I need you to listen to it. But the thing to recognize that the internet is largely governed by a set of norms and implicit agreements about how digital traffic is handled, including the right of people to communicate with each other freely. Once these norms start unraveling, they already have, by the way, the internet can fall apart quickly. Beyond email, the problem is that once a lot of energy moves off more public social platforms, like Parler, because we were shut down, and towards form of private communication, forms of that, serious attempts at regulation and control will follow. Most people who discuss internet policy like to draw a distinction between what they see as, good control, Joe, and regulation, don't worry, in public spaces, compared with freedoms that should exist in private spaces. But as I've written for many years, that's a false and dangerous distinction. Kick us off Parler? Then we'll go to email. Kick us off email? Don't worry, we'll go to Signal. Shut down Signal? What's next? You going to ban meetings in people's homes? What's next? Banning any communication between conservatives? That's not going to happen there. It's a conspiracy theory. It is. It's happening right now. Even your leftist buddies are like, hey, I'm not sure this is a good idea. The internet collapses if the central promise of the internet, the free flow of information, is essentially destroyed using a North Korean Chinese communist model that the left seems to be embracing. Maybe that's not such a good idea. Maybe conservatives were right the whole time. I'm reading about our Parler lawsuit right now. Let's go to one more section of this piece that's critically important. that the quickest pathway to global totalitarianism and authoritarianism is exactly the path we're on right now. Don't listen to my words. Listen to this guy, Sam. From the piece. When the negative energy from public social platforms moves very obviously to encrypted, ephemeral, and decentralized places, the calls will clearly come to limit or control access to them too, at a time when none of them can truly function without the implicit protection of governments and large organizations. Is it a good idea to cross this bridge and sacrifice our access to private messaging, starting with email, but over time implicating voice, chat, and other services too? The author thinks the answer is decidedly no. The way we end up with true global dictatorship and authoritarian regimes is by using modern technology to monitor, censor, and control private speech at a level that was literally unfathomable until recent technological breakthroughs. We must vehemently reject this power for the sake of the future, despite the continuous pain and suffering that allowing private hate speech will cause. The author's words, not mine. Even leftists are starting to see that we are walking down a path to dangerous global tyranny and authoritarianism. And media hacks are, what did Stalin call them? Useful idiots everywhere, ushering in a role of the authoritarianism they claim to be fighting by fighting Trump. The irony of it is so thick, it's unbelievable. I want to leave you with this quote by C.S. Lewis. Hat tip Scott Moorfield on his social media account from the Daily Caller put this up, but it's worth reading right now. And it's an interesting way to end the show. But it's an important one. It's a warning you all should heed, which I'd love to read. If we C.S. Lewis, quote, "Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It'd be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep, his cupidity may at some point be satiated, but those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience." Take those words to heart. We are living in very dangerous times. There's a lot going on behind the scenes for legal reasons I'm not talking about. But if you think I'm going to take any of this lying down, what I said yesterday matters. I will go bankrupt, destitute, and you will see me 6 feet under in a coffin, dying of a stress heart attack, before I'm going to let you do this to us and our movement without a most significant and heavy fight back. You are crazy. You picked the wrong cat, because I ain't it. Folks, please subscribe to my email list, bongino.com/newsletter. I'd appreciate it if you go to bonginoreport.com to get your news in the morning, bonginoreport.com. That's different from bongino.com. That's where we host our podcasts and write articles. It's our alternative to the now leftist drudge hit machine. And please subscribe to my show, not on YouTube, but on Rumble, rumble.com/Bongino.